Hello, my name is Rickard, and today we're going to do some compositing in Photoshop. And I've actually put together a little Nucly compositing challenge, which basically is an image randomizer. You're going to be shown 6 images from Unsplash, and you have to choose 2 and composite them together inside of Photoshop. So here you can see if you hit R on your keyboard, it will give you a reroll of some new random images. And essentially the challenge here is you need to choose 2 images from this and composite them together. And ideally you don't randomize too many times. You should be able to just hit randomize once, choose any 2 images from here and composite them together into something interesting inside of Photoshop. That's obviously the challenge here. You can also go up to 9 images if that is a little easier because you're going to have more options. Again, just hit R to randomize those images. And the challenge here is obviously making them look like something interesting in Photoshop. Oftentimes I find that the more guardrails or guidelines or rules that you put in place, the more easy it is to come up with ideas because, you know, it's not limitless. You have to come up with an idea from the images that you have. So what we're going to do today is we're going to set this to, one other thing on this image randomizer is if you hover over the image, it's going to show you the entire image. So this will give you an idea of whether it's a portrait or a landscape before you choose the ones that you want. Now you can also put in like animal and nature, and then when you re-roll, your images will include some animals and nature. However, I actually find that the challenge works best with none of these selected. I'm going to go to 6 here, and we're going to roll. And I don't want illustration, so let me roll one more time. And now that we've rolled, what we're going to do is take 2 of these images and composite them together. So for this, I think what I'll do is we could use these 2. That could make for an interesting composite, you know, maybe the bench right in the middle of this street here. But I think this and this would also make for a kind of interesting composite. So I'm going to select both of those and then hit download. It is going to go ahead and download both of those images into my downloads folder. I'm going to grab both of those and put them into Photoshop. Okay, so I think what would be interesting here is to have these people with the waterfall as their background. Now, I'm not crazy about this tree. I think that doesn't quite make sense for this scene. So what I'm going to do first is see if I can just get rid of this tree with some gen fill. So let's go like this, and let's go here and say remove tree and see what happens. And that did quite a good job. I think we'll stick with this one. And then I'm going to add a new layer here at the very top, do Shift Option Command D to merge all that together. Now I want to remove the background. So I'm going to click on this remove background, and you can see that that kind of kept my people there. That's not really what I want. So I'm going to delete the layer mask here, and instead of remove background, I'm going to go up to select sky. And that did a pretty good job. Now what I can do is if I hold down Option when I add a mask, it's going to remove whatever's selected, and that is what I want right there. Okay, next I'm going to take this layer, go ahead and convert it into a smart object, and then drag it into this document here. We're going to make this a little bit bigger. So maybe something like this. And then I want these guys a little bit lower. And also now that they're in place, it really doesn't make sense that we have this background here. So I'm going to go ahead and inside here just kind of go onto my quick select brush and select this background area. And I don't mind if it over selects. I just don't want it to under select. I'm going to go to my mask, fill that in with black with Option Delete because black's my foreground color, and then go ahead and save this. Because it's a smart object, it'll update right away in here. So already that's looking pretty darn cool. The other thing I may want to do here, just to add a little interest here, is maybe get rid of this branch here so we can see his leg, and then make whatever he's holding here a little more obvious. So I'm going to do that with a mask in here. It looks like this is a bottle of sorts, which is kind of cool. And I'm going to have to kind of invent where his leg is here, because it looks like it's somewhere about there. And maybe somewhere like this. And let's fill in, or let's add a mask. Again, I'm holding down Option. And already that looks pretty darn cool. The other thing we could do here, just to get something kind of happening in front of our image here, and just help sell the illusion of the depth here, is maybe get this rainbow here kind of a little bit coming in front of them. Now I think inside of my lens flare pack I have a rainbow of sorts that could work here. So let me go in here and scroll toward the bottom. I do have a bit of a rainbow in there. All right, so let me grab that. I'm gonna make this quite a lot bigger. Kind of just want this rainbow. So what I'm going to do here is kind of move this so that I can isolate that rainbow, and then I'm going to do a very rough mask just around the rainbow here, like so. And then add a mask. We're going to put this on screen and then kind of just rotate it so that it looks like it could be a continuation of this rainbow up here. So maybe something like that. And then I also want to rasterize this so I'm not dealing with a smart object. And then I could probably just apply this layer mask. I don't need it to be, I'm not going to use any of the other elements. So something like this, and then I'll just add some blur to this. And then let's turn this so that it kind of matches better with that there. So something like this. And then we're going to add a gradient map to it. Just get rid of it there. So it's just kind of coming in right there. And I think that right there kind of just a bit of implied rainbow coming in front of them sells the illusion that they're part of this image. All right, and then the other thing I might want to do here is just add a overall color grade to the whole thing. Could also add a little bit of film grain to the whole thing. Again, we're just trying to sell the illusion that these are all part of the same photo. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and add a layer. And I like doing gradient or film grain with camera raw. So if we make a 50% gray layer and convert this to a smart object, we can call this film grain. And the reason I'm converting it to a smart object is so I can always go back and make revisions afterwards. Then I'm going to go up to here, camera raw filter, go to the effects, turn on some grain. Zoom in a little bit here, and let's turn down the roughness and maybe increase the size. All right, then I'm going to put this on linear light, Now that's quite strong, so we can take down our fill a little bit. And also based on how detailed the people are, I actually may want to decrease the size of this grain. And that's another good reason to have this as a separate layer. So that's looking pretty good. Last thing I want to do is add just a little bit of a color grade to the whole thing. And really with a color grade, what we're doing is we're kind of adding some color to our highlights and shadows. And an easy way to do that is to go to our curves, go to our blue, just lift up the bottom of the curve a bit. It's going to add blue in all of our shadows, and take down the top. And that'll add some yellow in back to our highlights. So here's a before and after. You can see what that's doing. The nice thing about this is it just makes everything feel a bit more like it belongs together. The one other thing I could do here is get some implied rain or mist onto our lens. To do that, I can use one of my dust overlays. This one here. There's a few in here. Let's see which one works best. That one's too dusty. That one might work. I find these darker ones always kind of work a little bit better. Let's try dust 34. I think that one. So this has a few water spots. I think that's nice. Let's just put this here. We're going to put this on screen as well. And then just take down this until it's pretty subtle. Another way I could do this is using one of my dust brushes. So if I go to my brushes here, and I think I might even have it in my favorite brushes here, the one that I like to use, which is this kind of atmosphere one here. If I take the size on that down, kind of select this color, you can see what it's doing. It's creating these like bouquets, but if we make this a bit bigger and take our flow down a lot, we can just add a few hints of it like this. And that kind of implies that there's a bit of like water on our lens that would be causing these blooms from light. And we can take that down to be super subtle. But anything that crosses between our two elements that we're compositing together is going to help sell the illusion that this is all one photo. So I'm pretty happy with that. And there you can see that's a very quick composite from our challenge there. Let's go back to our challenge, and I'm going to clear the selection here. And if you just hit C on your keyboard, that'll also clear the selection. And this time I want to do these two images. I feel like that could also be a pretty fun project. Let's go ahead and download. And once both of them have been downloaded, we'll go ahead and take these two and pull them into Photoshop. And got our background. What I want to do first is select this from our background. So let's go to our object selection tool and do a square right around the bench. That did a pretty good job, except for right in these areas. Another thing we could try is the select subject. See if that gives us a better result. And as you can see, that did indeed give us a better result. I'm going to do Command J to put that on its own layer. And that actually did a great job, so we don't really need to do anything else with that. However, I do want to select kind of the ground underneath there, both because it has a nice ambient shadow and also because this kind of dirt underneath it, I feel like that belongs under their bench. So I'm going to go ahead and make kind of a rough selection just of this area here around the bench, not including that kind of grade in the background. I'm going to do Command J, and we'll call this ground, and we'll call this benches. And then I'm going to take both of these layers and drag them in here. And then let's go ahead and make the benches layer a smart object. don't care so much about the ground, but I do care that the benches are nice and high resolution. And we're going to put these, let's say right here. And we do need to adjust their kind of perspective a little bit. They don't quite belong. Probably they work a little bit better there just because our perspective is a bit better there. So I might just move them to here. Now I do need to make them a bit smaller. So I think something like this looks pretty nice. Now why they're in the middle of the street obviously makes little sense, but I think it still is kind of interesting, and it also gives us a nice center to our composite there. Okay, so now for the ground layer in the background, I'm going to put that on multiply to start with, see what that looks like. Maybe if I add a curve layer to it, clip this curve layer, and let's try to get rid of or make the ground that's there almost white in the edges, so just the dirty part underneath is showing. And realistically we should also get rid of some of that color, so let's add a hue saturation. We'll clip that as well and just take down our saturation there. I'm going to add a mask to the ground, and then with a soft brush I'm going to just get rid of the dirt around here so we don't have a sharp edge anywhere. Then the one other thing I want to do is I want to put this behind this post. That's going to serve two purposes. One, it just realistically should be behind there, but also anytime you can overlap elements in your composite, it's going to help sell the illusion of that composite. So let's move this a little bit further back. And then if we turn that off temporarily, we can select this post. And then hold down Option and add a mask there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. The other thing is we have really strong white highlights on the elements in the street because there's direct sunlight. So this really needs to have stronger highlights. So we're going to do that with a curve layer. Again, we'll clip it, and we're just going to bring up our whites until we get those strong highlights on there. Now it looks more like it belongs in this part of the street here. So right about there. Okay, and then to make this whole thing a little more interesting, I kind of feel like we should restrict the amount of colors we're using, and I really like this teal color. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a hue saturation to my background layer. I'm going to select the green leaves here, and I'm going to push that toward that kind of cyan-y color, right? So something like this, be a little bit lighter. And I really want this just on the green, so I'm going to have to restrict this color as much as possible so that it's just happening to our greens. Right about there. And I want an even stronger effect here, so I'm going to add a selective color, and we're going to target the greens again. And in the greens, I want to get rid of the yellow to really make those greens as cyan as possible. And I might even go into the yellows and pull out yellows as well. I'm thinking that looks pretty nice. And maybe we even add a little bit in the greens here, take some of the black out as well to make it a little bit lighter, and maybe add some cyan as well. So I'm liking the way this is looking. Maybe just to make it a little more interesting, I do like this kind of reddish color in there. I think it complements this cyan, so maybe we take this element here and maybe push that a little bit more toward that. So I'm going to make a selection here, oops, of this element. And then I'm going to add a curve at the very top. And let's look at what kind of colors would make this a little more of an interesting element here. Maybe if we did this, let's try making it red. So red is interesting, but I don't know that it totally works. Maybe if we just do kind of in the highlights. I do feel like it's a nice counter to this. So something like that. And then just to give this whole thing a little bit more of kind of a 70s vibe, especially with these weird colored chairs, I'm going to add a curve to the very top. And let's go to our red, kind of just increase our red in the highlights and throw some strong cyan into our shadows. We're going to do on the blue channel somewhat similar, but the other way around. So like this, bringing up the bottom and taking down the top. And right away, I think that looks pretty darn interesting. And yeah, I like that. So that again is 2 images from our challenge. Let's go ahead and hit R again. We're going to roll this one more time. And here, let's see what interesting things we could do here. We could try combining this and this. That could be kind of interesting. We could also try to combine this and this. That might also be interesting. In fact, let's do that. I'm going to download those 2 images and let's see what we can do putting these together. All right, so I'm going to take those 2 images. We'll drag them down here into Photoshop. And I really like that image. This one's kind of interesting too. So I'm thinking we see if we can isolate this tree and foreground. So it's doing a relatively decent job, but let's try select subject and see if that gives us a better result. So that did a nice job of the tree. I'm going to do Command J, and then I'm going to use the quick selection brush here and see if I can select just this background underneath the tree. And let's go to select and mask, and let's turn on our radius here. See if we can get some of these brushes here better selected, meaning the plants. And I think that's pretty good. Let's hit OK. I'm going to do Command J, and then we can call this tree. We can call this foreground. Let's take both of these layers and drag them in here. Already it's kind of interesting. Let's do Command J. We're going to make this a bit smaller. And then let's go ahead and crop this to there. And obviously these are coming from a night scene while the background is a daylight scene. So let's try fixing that up. I'm going to put these into a group, and I'm just going to put a curve on the group. So the curve is only applying to my foreground elements here. I'm going to make this a bit lighter. So I like that. I do feel like we need more mist behind here. So I'm going to add a new layer here and go to my brushes, right mouse click, and I've got a nice atmosphere brush. If I put on brush stroke, you can kind of see the way this works. I want to make sure my foreground color is white. want to make sure my flow is set kind of low, so maybe around 20. And then I'm just going to add some mist behind this tree. And that's just going to help separate our foreground from our background here. We'll take the opacity on that down, and then maybe just to help sell this all being one scene, we'll take a little bit of this and kind of pull it into our foreground here. And then another thing that might make this a little more interesting is if we kind of make the background a little bit darker too, just to get a little bit closer to kind of the strong contrast of our foreground element here. Because right now their contrasts are competing a bit. So I'm going to take this down, just start making it a little bit darker. And let's take our fog layers down a bit. And I still feel like this is too contrasty, so I'm going to go back into my curve here, just kind of take down the highlights as much as I can. And now that I'm doing that, it might be interesting if this was a little bit more surreal. So let's try another option where this becomes much darker. And of course, some of this is just trial and error, see what actually looks good. But I'm thinking this actually looks much more interesting. So let's make this more of a night scene overall. So we'll do something like this. And then for my background, I want it to be a little more purple. So I'm going to add another curves layer here, kind of go into my reds and my greens. Something like this. Let's try putting this over everything. So everything's getting that color grade. Okay, and then the other thing I want to do here is I want to create kind of like a moon and a little bit of a shimmer on top of the water. So let's try first just adding this shimmer. We're going to do that with a curve layer here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the original here, make a copy of it, put this right under the tree and add a mask to it and then put it on screen. And then in my mask properties, I'm going to add some feather. Okay, so now we're getting a bit of that glowing water, which I like. I want to also add a moon behind here just to add a little more interest to this scene. So for that, I'm going to use one of my brushes again. Got some nice moons in here. Maybe this one. And I'm just going to do this on a blank white layer. And for this, I want to make sure my flow's up to 100 again. And then let's do Command T for transform. I'll make this a bit smaller. Something like this. Starts to make this whole scene a little more interesting. And if we select our layer here, and let's try select sky, see how that does. And that did a great job. Let's go back onto our moon layer and hold down Option. Oops. don't hold down Option, just add a mask there. So right away, that's more interesting to look at. I do think we need a little bit of that foreground tree showing. So maybe I'll take this layer here and go ahead and make a selection of our foreground. And then on this layer, I'm going to use just a soft brush and with a low flow setting, just kind of paint out the mask. So we have a little bit of kind of lighter colors just in these areas here. So and then maybe just to sell this, I want to put a little bit of kind of a glow from that moonlight around these edges. I think that's just going to help sell this composite a bit more. So I'm going to add a layer. We call this edge light. And I'm going to just use kind of a bluish color for this. Probably a little bit lighter though. And then just hit the edges of this. So where that blue light is going to be hitting from the moon. Something like that. And let's put this on overlay. And then I'm also going to paint with this same brush just a little bit on the top of this one here. And here. And there you go. Let's go ahead and do a film grain layer on this one as well. We can do that with just getting a 50% gray here. Doing our camera raw filter. Now if we select this, because our last camera raw filter was the film grain, it's going to give this the same effect. We'll put this on linear light, take that down maybe to 20. And then we can also add a curve. And for this, I'm just going to do a little bit of a blue yellow curve. And then maybe to make this a little more ominous, we'll go to our greens, kind of pull that down to make this a little more purple. And maybe even give it some red for that same purpose. And now that I've done that, I feel like our moon is maybe a little too strong. So let's just take the opacity of that down a touch. And there you go. So that is our third composite, and we'll do more of these, but I wanted you to get familiar with the tool. Go ahead and try it out. It is definitely beta. I just put it together, but let's see what you can do. And if you do put together some composites, go ahead and post them on our Nucly Facebook group, and just add the hashtag Nucly Compositing Challenge. I want to see what you guys can do with this, and if you have any feedback, definitely leave it for me. Also, if you have any feedback, you can put it in the comments for this video. I'm going to do a few more of these where I just do composites right off the bat, just with whatever images we have. I feel it's a good way to just learn some compositing techniques that we might not otherwise use. All right, that's it. Here's some other videos you can check out, and I'll see you guys next time.